Welcome back to Grimverse History, where we uncover the strange and forgotten sides of history. Tonight, we enter medieval England to witness the true story of a 6-year-old girl crowned queen and married to a king 3 decades older. History loves to dress its darkest truths in silk and ceremony. We are told medieval royal weddings were grand, sacred, and honorable. But what happens when the bride is still losing her teeth? What happens when crowns are heavier than childhood itself? This marriage was celebrated by bishops, blessed by the church, and praised across Europe. Yet almost no one asks what the girl at the altar understood, or why her story quietly vanished while kings were immortalized. Why did England gain a queen and then choose to forget her? You step into a vast stone abbey. The door closes behind you with a hollow echo. Cold air creeps beneath your clothes. Candle wax drips slowly, staining the floor like frozen tears. Above you, banners sway gently, and whispers ripple through the crowd. At the center of it all, you see her, small, still. Her hand disappears inside the king's grasp. Before we go any further, take a deep breath. Let the noise of your day fade away. If these stories help you unwind, feel grounded, or gently disconnect from the world, you're always welcome here. You may like the video, subscribe, or turn on notifications if you wish, as a quiet signal that you'd like to walk with us again. You're safe here. Now, dim the lights. Let the rhythm of your breathing slow. Allow your thoughts to soften. There's nothing you need to solve tonight. Only listen. It is the year 1396. England is bruised by war, desperate for alliances, and ruled by a restless king. In this world, marriages are not promises. They are weapons. And tonight, you will witness one of the smallest brides in English history, and the silence that swallowed her life afterward. You are a priest standing in the cold stone halls of Westminster Abbey. Your breath fogs the autumn air as your fingers tighten around a worn prayer book. You sense something is wrong before anyone whispers it aloud. The courtiers murmur that this will be the strangest royal wedding England has ever seen. The bride has arrived from France, a princess, daughter of King Charles VI. You have blessed many unions in your life, yet never felt a hush like this. The great oak doors open. King Richard II steps forward, 29 years old, tall, composed, his fair hair caught in stained glass light. And beside him walks a child. She barely reaches his elbow. Her small hand disappears inside his gloved palm. She is no more than 6 years old. You swallow, steadying yourself at the altar rail. In that instant, you are no longer a priest, but a witness. History will never ask again. This child is Isabella of Valois, soon to be Queen of England. You have seen brides of 12, even 13. Politics has long replaced affection among crowns. You remember the world you live in. 50 years ago, the Black Death erased half of Europe. Life is short, and kings act quickly. This marriage is not desire, it is diplomacy, an alliance meant to pause a brutal war with France. As the ceremony begins, you study the girl's face. She looks curious, not afraid. Her wide eyes drift across candles, arches, velvet, and gold. When Richard speaks his vows, his voice is calm and restrained. There is no expectation of consummation. Everyone present understands this. The child will be raised at court until she comes of age. This is how things are done. You bless the union, though your heart beats unevenly. You tell yourself duty is heavier than doubt. This was never a love story. It was a calculated move in the 100 Years' War. A child placed on a throne before she could choose her own fate. Isabella was born on November 9th, 1389, at the Louvre Palace in Paris. She was the eldest daughter of King Charles VI of France. Her father was known to history as Charles the Mad. At times, he ruled with clarity and authority. At other times, he lost his mind completely. He forgot his own name. He believed his body was made of glass. He feared that a single movement would shatter him. You imagine the child watching all of this in silence. You imagine how early fear taught her to stay still. One day her father laughed with her and covered her in gifts. The next, he hid in corners, screaming about assassins. Servants rushed the children away, but the confusion remained. Her mother, Isabeau of Bavaria, held the court together. She was intelligent, ambitious, and sharply aware of power. She understood that her children were political pieces. She looked at Isabella and saw leverage. Beauty and blood would buy peace one day. Isabella grew up in a world shaped by war. England and France had been locked in conflict for nearly 60 years. Villages burned, treasuries emptied, generations aged without peace. By the 1390s, both kingdoms were exhausted. Courts whispered about ending the bloodshed, but peace needed more than promises. It needed a bond that could not easily be broken. That is where Isabella entered history. In 1395, secret negotiations began. The proposal was simple and shocking. Isabella would marry Richard II of England. Richard was grieving. His first wife, Anne of Bohemia, had died of plague in 1394. She had been loved by the people, and her death left Richard without an heir. At first, he resisted remarriage. Love, rare among kings, made him hesitate. But duty eventually outweighed memory. France offered more than a bride. They offered a dowry of 800,000 francs. They offered a 28-year truce, an entire generation without war. There was one problem. Isabella was only 6 years old. Even by medieval standards, this was extreme. But French negotiators reframed it as hope. A new queen untouched by hatred. A child raised at the English court. French by birth, English by destiny. You can already see it forming. A child crowned not by choice, but by necessity. Richard's counselors were divided. Some saw clear advantage. The dowry would refill royal coffers. The truce would free England to face Scotland and unrest in Ireland. Others feared scandal. Even medieval nobles hesitated at a bride so young. Richard noticed something different. When Isabella's portrait arrived, his expression softened. You sense he saw not a queen, but a child who needed care. Whispers followed him through the court, not of desire, but guardianship. Negotiations dragged on for months. Every detail of Isabella's future was written into treaty law. She would keep French attendance. She could follow French customs. She would write freely to her family. Most important of all, the marriage would not be consummated. This protection was stated clearly and formally. In Paris, Isabella played with dolls. She did not know councils were deciding her life. Her tutors added English words to her lessons. Seamstresses began sewing a queen's trousseau. She was told she would marry a great king. At 6, it sounded like a story. The wedding took place twice. Diplomacy demanded precision. On October 31st, 1396, at the English-held port of Calais, Isabella married Richard II. She was 7 years old. The ceremony was small and political. Calais stood as neutral ground. You imagine the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Her gown of cloth of gold was heavy with pearls. She needed help to walk. Richard knelt to her level to exchange rings. Witnesses noted his deliberate gentleness. A year later, she was crowned at Westminster Abbey. Crowds flooded London to see the child queen. Some reportedly died in the crush. The coronation was meant to silence doubt. Pageantry replaced unease. Isabella was carried through the streets beneath English roses, and French fleur-de-lis. A crown was shaped to fit her small head. English duchesses walked beside her as guardians. She smiled and waved as instructed. The words of blessing were still new to her ears. The feast lasted 3 days. Jugglers, musicians, and courtly plays promised peace. Isabella ate carefully at the high table. Experienced courtiers whispered again. Truces were fragile. Richard was powerful, but not universally loved. For now, Isabella was safe. Richard gave her her own household at Westminster. French and English attendants served together. Her days filled with lessons, language, custom, etiquette. Richard took a personal interest in her care. You cannot help but notice the irony. A child was asked to represent peace between kingdoms that men could not control. The other children at court accepted Isabella quickly. Royal households were always filled with young nobles raised together. She found comfort among girls her own age. They helped her learn the quiet rules of English court life. Her closest friend was Margaret Holland. Margaret was only slightly older, yet seemed worldly. She taught Isabella English games and gentle cautions, which whispers were safe, which smiles were not. They spent long afternoons in Isabella's garden, needlework in their laps, politics hidden in simple conversation. Margaret spoke of noble families and old grudges, of alliances that never truly died. Isabella listened carefully. She asked once why English nobles watched each other so closely. Margaret answered without hesitation. Richard's reign had always been uneasy. There had been rebellion when he was young. Forgiveness did not come easily to him. Many lords distrusted his favourites. Others believed he listened too little to counsel. Power in England, Margaret said, was never held alone. Your marriage brings peace, she told Isabella. But some see peace as weakness. Isabella began to observe more closely. Silences when Richard entered a room. Shifts in tone when she appeared. She learned that even children stood inside politics. The years 1397 and 1398 passed quietly. Isabella grew steadier. Her English became fluent. The court felt less foreign. Richard treated her with careful kindness. Westminster no longer frightened her. Its corridors became familiar. Her education deepened. Languages, history, letters. Richard insisted she learn to read and write in both tongues. Scholars were brought to teach her. She loved history most of all. Stories of kings and mistakes long remembered. She loved maps as well. Parchments spread across the floor. Borders traced by careful hands. Geography, her tutor explained, shaped wars as much as men did. Isabella knelt beside the maps, tracing coastlines with her finger. She imagined ships carrying armies and envoys across the narrow sea. This strip of water, Master William told her, pointing between Dover and Calais, has been both bridge and barrier. Your marriage, he said gently, was meant to make it only a bridge. At 8 years old, Isabella understood enough. She was more than a girl learning court manners. She was a symbol of peace, and symbols, she would learn, were fragile. In early 1399, the court changed. Conversation stopped when she entered. Worried glances replaced easy smiles. Even Margaret Holland grew tense. Richard came less often. When he did, he stared toward the Thames, as if waiting for ships that had not yet appeared. The gifts stopped. Isabella feared she had done something wrong. The truth was far darker. Henry Bolingbroke, Richard's exiled cousin, had returned with an army. Nobles began abandoning the king. The court's fragile calm began to collapse. Isabella realized the danger one morning. Several attendants were gone. No one would say why. By afternoon, shouts echoed from the courtyard. Armed men wore unfamiliar colors. That night, Margaret burst into her chamber. "You must pack," she whispered. "Now." Where are we going? To the Tower. Isabella understood at once. The Tower was both palace and prison. They left Westminster in silence. No procession, only guards and drawn curtains. London sounded different, urgent, uneasy. At the Tower, her rooms were secure but confining. Bars on the windows, guards at every door. Her French attendants remained. Most English ones were dismissed. For the first time, she felt alone. Richard visited her on the second day. He looked aged, unkempt, unsteady. "My dear child," he said, kneeling before her, "our circumstances have changed." "Are you still king?" Isabella asked. "For now," he replied, "but I may not be able to protect you." He explained everything: Bolingbroke's claim, the noble's betrayal, the danger to peace with France. "What will happen to me?" Isabella asked calmly. "I do not know," Richard said. He would speak to her now as an equal, not a sheltered child, but a political reality. She learned the truth that day. Her worth lay not in who she was, but in what she represented. The coming weeks passed in silence and fear. The city beyond the walls hummed with unrest. News reached her only as rumor. Then, one grey October morning, she heard heavy footsteps approaching her chamber. When the doors opened, the guards were unfamiliar. They wore the red rose of Henry Bolingbroke. The man who followed them was tall and controlled, a soldier's posture, a politician's eyes. This was Henry himself. Now, Henry IV of England. Isabella stood and curtsied as she had been taught. Henry studied her carefully. He addressed her by her title. "Your Grace." She noticed that choice immediately. "I regret that we must speak of your future like this," he said. "What has become of the king?" Isabella asked. Henry did not hesitate. "Richard of Bordeaux is no longer king." He did not say forced, he said abdicated. Isabella understood the difference, but she asked the only question that mattered. "What becomes of me?" Henry paused. "That depends," he said, "on France, on my counsel, and on your conduct." With that, Isabella entered the most dangerous chapter of her life. Richard's protection was gone. She was no longer a child queen in training. She was leverage. At court, opinions split quickly. Some urged her immediate return to France. Others argued she was too valuable to release. As long as Isabella remained in England, France would hesitate. So she stayed, comfortably housed, carefully watched. Isabella adapted with remarkable calm. She offended no one. She plotted nothing. Yet she refused to surrender her dignity. She remained queen in law, if not in power. Her French ladies guided her carefully. They answered only to her. "You are still queen," Madame de la Tour reminded her. "Henry has not ended your marriage. While that remains true, you still matter." Hope, however, came at a price. Rumors reached the Tower. Richard was ill. Richard was imprisoned. Richard was dead. Then confirmation arrived. Richard had died at Pontefract Castle. The loss struck her deeply. Not as a wife, but as a child who had lost her protector. He had been kind. He had kept her safe. His death meant something worse. If a crowned king could be erased, so could a foreign princess. In early 1400, Henry's terms arrived. She could return to France, but only if she recognized Henry as king, only if she renounced all claims as Richard's widow. A clean solution for Henry. Isabella would leave willingly, and with her departure, the marriage would quietly disappear into history. Henry's offer solved everything for him. It freed him from the peace treaty and avoided the spectacle of expelling a child queen. For Isabella, the choice was cruelly simple. Leave England and accept that her 3 years as queen meant nothing, or refuse. and remain a prisoner. She was 10 years old, and the decision would affect 2 kingdoms. Her advisors disagreed. Some urged her to return to France, to safety. Others insisted she remained England's rightful queen. Isabella wavered. She missed her family, but accepting the terms felt like betraying Richard's memory. In the end, the decision was no longer hers. During a moment of clarity, King Charles VI ordered his daughter home. France made its position unmistakable. Delay would mean hostility. Henry did not risk war. Isabella was released. The terms were left deliberately vague. Each side could call her return voluntary or forced. She left England in the summer of 1401, 5 years of life behind her, a crown left on the floor of history. France felt unfamiliar. She spoke French with an English accent, preferred English dress, had to relearn court etiquette. She returned as an 11-year-old shaped by loss. Her father did not recognize her at first. His illness had deepened. Her mother welcomed her, warmly, cautiously. Isabella's value was obvious. Former Queen of England, bearer of knowledge and leverage. She answered questions carefully, never betraying England, never defying France. By 14, suitors appeared. Some feared her power, others desired it. Isabella had learned her lesson. Marriage could protect, but it could also vanish overnight. In 1403, a proposal arrived from Charles of Orléans, her cousin, cultured, powerful. This match was different. He spoke to her as an equal. He wanted Isabella, not her title. She agreed. They married in 1406 at Notre Dame, a public celebration, a declaration of choice. She walked confidently, not a child surrendering her future, but a woman claiming it. The years that followed were happy. Charles respected her mind, shared her love of learning. Their court became a center of culture, books, music, art. In 1407, their daughter was born. Isabella held her close and promised her something she never had: choice. For the first time, peace felt real. As the king's brother, Louis of Orléans claimed the right to govern during Charles VI's illnesses. The Duke of Burgundy rejected this claim. France quietly split in two. At first, it felt like another court rivalry. Isabella stayed above it. Family, art, and learning took her focus. Everything changed in November 1407. Louis of Orléans was murdered in the streets of Paris, killed in daylight, on Burgundian orders. France slid towards civil war. Charles of Orléans now stood exposed, powerful and targeted. Guards surrounded Isabella. Letters were watched. Freedom vanished. Charles hardened. Grief turned into resolve. War became inevitable. Isabella supported him, but she feared the cost. She had seen what political violence did to kingdoms. In 1408, their son Charles was born. A brief calm, a new heir, and a new danger. Isabella watched over him carefully. Languages, history, diplomacy. She knew what courts could take from a child. As war dragged on, Charles left to fight. Isabella stayed behind to govern. Supplies, allies, orders. She proved capable, respected. The war devastated France. Villages burned. Trade collapsed. Isabella used her position to help. Aid, safe passage, charity. Her reputation grew. In 1409, her daughter Marguerite was born. Joy mixed with fear. The birth nearly killed her. She survived, but her health never returned. Doctors warned her. Another pregnancy could end her life. She and Charles adapted. Love expressed through counsel, not closeness. In 1410, Burgundy sought English help. Isabella was alarmed. She reached out quietly to England, warning, persuading, trying to prevent another disaster. Her diplomacy was noticed. She was consulted, respected, but her body weakened. Illness took hold. Breath came harder. She prepared for death carefully. Her children, her household, her legacy. Isabella of Valois died on September 13th, 1409. She was 20 years old. Europe mourned. She had been Queen of England, Duchess of Orleans, mediator, mother. Her absence deepened France's divisions. Her legacy endured, not as a symbol used by others, but as a woman who learned to choose. Isabella lived inside harsh limits, and still, she shaped her own life. Her legacy is not one of victimhood, but of triumph over circumstances that would have crushed a lesser spirit. In the end, Isabella's story is a reminder that every age has its own moral complexities, and that the people of the past, however different their world may seem, shared our fundamental human needs for love, security, and purpose. The footsteps fade. The candles grow low, and the story gently loosens its grip. Somewhere behind us, stone walls still breathe cold air. A chapel remains lit by trembling flame. Silk rustles once more. A child's crown rests, far too heavy, on a pillow of centuries. Nothing moves now. Only the echo of a bell, half remembered, half lost in time. Not ringing anymore, just humming softly, like a memory that refuses to shout. You feel it close. The quiet weight of history settling back where it belongs. As if a book is being closed, its leather cover warm beneath your palm. As if a door gently swings shut, not to seal the past away, but to let it finally rest. The world around you returns. The room you're in breathes again. Your body feels heavier, calmer. The night holds you the way it should. Nothing needs fixing. Nothing needs judging. Some stories are not meant to be resolved, only witnessed and then released. If these quiet journeys through forgotten hours bring you comfort or help your thoughts slow their pace, you're always welcome to walk with us again. A like, a share, or a gentle subscription is simply a way of leaving the lantern lit. No pressure, only invitation. For now, let your breathing slow. Let sleep take what history has returned. Goodbye, and we will meet again.